Good morning. So glad to be with you all this morning. I'm out on my patio on an absolutely gorgeous day. The title of my lesson today is Just Speak. And today we're going to spend a few minutes in Exodus chapter 6. There's some really good things for us to learn in all of this as Moses just continues to wrestle with God about doing the mission he was called to. So we're going to read in chapters 5:22, and we go through 6:12. And I want to start in chapter 5 because at the very end it introduces a conversation that Moses has with God that he continues in chapter 6. So it says this in chapter 5:22. Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Why, Lord, have you brought trouble on this people? Is this why you sent me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has brought trouble on this people, and you have not rescued your people at all." And then the Lord said to Moses, "Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand, he will let them go. Because of my mighty hand, he will drive them out of his country." God also said to Moses, "I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as God Almighty. But by my name, the Lord, I did not make myself fully known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan where they resided as foreigners. Moreover, I have heard the groaning of the Israelites, whom the Egyptians are enslaving, and I've remembered my covenant. Therefore say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being slaves to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my own people and will be your God. And then you will know that I am the Lord your God who brought you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. And I will bring you to the land I swore with uplifted hand to give to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob. I will give it to you as a possession. I am the Lord." Moses reported this to the Israelites, but they did not listen to him because of their discouragement and harsh labor. And then the Lord said to Moses, "Go, tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the Israelites go out of his country." But Moses said to the Lord, "If the Israelites will not listen to me, why would Pharaoh listen to me, since I speak with faltering lips?" So God tells Moses to go back to Pharaoh and deliver a message. And Moses is obviously struggling with this. He's tried it before, and quite frankly, the results weren't good. So Moses is hesitating, but here's the thing. God makes it clear to Moses what he's supposed to do and who will do the heavy lifting in the mission. I mean, over and over, God says, "I will do it. I will do it with my mighty hand. I will make it happen." I mean, he says, "I will do it," over and over. You, Moses, you just speak to Pharaoh. But even so, because of Moses' hesitation, he instantly decides in his heart that he can't make it happen. Moses heard God. He knows what the mission is, but quickly began thinking of all the potential results. When we as Christians take on the job of analyzing the results of our mission, of our Christian mission and its effectiveness, we can tend to get really self-consumed. We can really miss what God is trying to say. Truth is, according to our standards, the mission of God seems to fail a lot. Since we don't like to live in failure, we tend to want to blame someone else. And that is what Moses does. He says, basically, "God, why have you done this to me?" I mean, yikes, right? But here's the important thing to remember. This reaction is natural. It's dangerous, but it's natural. Why is it dangerous, though? Because over time, we learn to focus on the outcome of our obedient acts. And as we do that, we lose sight of the character of the God who's actually asking us to obey and doing the work. We focus on the outcome, we lose sight of the character. The results can get us to lose sight of God's power, and that can override everything. And then when that kind of thought reaches full-blown maturity, our obedience, our Christian obedience, becomes religion. It can become mere acts of service, all done within the comfortable confines of what we think is possible. We control what we do and don't do, mostly because we want to feel effective. We lose sight of the power of God and the wisdom of His timing, and quite frankly, the mystery of how it all works. We essentially reduce God to our humanistic way of thinking. And this is not, in the end, what we were meant to be. To be human is not to be frail or weak or rebellious or scared. That's natural, but those are marks of sin. Those are marks of falling short. That's not who God intended us to be in our mission. To be fully human is to consistently allow ourselves to be bold and faithful, not because of how we see the effectiveness of the mission, but because we know, as image bearers of God, we work hard to see the reality of the mission through His eyes. And it's a huge difference. But let's face it, we need reminders. Moses did, right? 3 times in chapter 6, God states very clearly to Moses, I am the Lord. He says it in verse 2, in verse 6, and verse 8. He says, I am the Lord, Moses. Lord means the one true God. The only one who holds the power over the entire universe. He says, that's me. God holds the power, but He chooses us. So what is our role? Our role is to just speak. Let's skip down to verse 28. We're going to skip the genealogy and go down and read 28 through 30. And it says this, Now when the Lord spoke to Moses in Egypt, He said to him, I am the Lord. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, everything I tell you. But Moses said to the Lord, Since I speak with faltering lips, why would Pharaoh listen to me? Now I've thought about this week. What are these faltering lips Moses talks about? In one sense, this is what I appreciate about the biblical narrative. Moses is just being real and so relatable to us today as Christians. This is the 3rd time he has brought up to God his inability to speak clearly. In chapter 4, verse 10, he says he isn't eloquent, but he is slow of speech and tongue. In chapter 6, verse 12, he tells God that he has faltering lips. And then again, he says the same thing in 6, verse 30. For someone who thinks he isn't good at speaking, Moses sure has a lot to say, right? That's one of the reasons I don't think it's really what he was saying. It really wasn't about his speaking. So what is he really saying here? I'm not totally sure, but other translations say Moses has uncircumcised lips. The NIV says faltering lips, but Moses says uncircumcised lips. And there's been a lot of debate about what he means by that. So I'm not sure the correct theological answer, but here's what I think. Moses tells God, look, my lips are uncircumcised, they're faltering, they're unholy. In other words, God, you have to find someone else to do this. I'm simply not good enough or talented enough to do this job. Think about it. In chapter 5, Moses obeyed God and went to Pharaoh. And instead of Pharaoh just repenting, he threw Moses out. And then he made the work for the Israelites harder, so they attacked and criticized Moses. Oh, and then there was that time in chapter 2 where Moses tries to be a hero for God. He sees an Egyptian beating one of God's people, so he killed the Egyptian, thinking he was being righteous. And of course, it totally backfired. And he had to flee to Midian and hide. He has already proven he can try to do things right and mess things up. So to protect himself, he tries to convince God, you know what? Use someone else. Have you ever felt this way? I know I have. Like I said, it's natural. The truth is, we're broken people. We have highs and lows. We get some things really right in our walk with God, and we also get some things pretty twisted up. But let's remember, we do not hold the power. We're just given a simple task, and that task is just speak. Let the results be all sorted out by God. I've had to really disciple my heart on this recently. Lately, I've been trying to share my faith a lot more, and I have been, and it's been exciting, but I want to share with you about one experience in particular, okay? And I was in Home Depot. I was getting a piece of plywood for my garage, so I needed that plywood cut in half. So I asked the guy working in the plywood department to help me. And then as we're talking, the Spirit prompted me to share with him. And honestly, I resisted at first. I made up all kinds of excuses in my mind as to why sharing my faith with him would not work. He doesn't look that open. Maybe he's too busy. Maybe he won't listen to me. Maybe he'll think I'm weird. You know what it is. But then I repented and I decided to follow the lead of the Spirit. And I asked him if he had a relationship with God. And I told him I was a Christian. I told him about my own faith and my church. And he listened really attentively. And then he said this, "Thanks, man, but I'm not interested. But I'm happy for you, though." And I went, wow, that didn't work. Or did it? Guys, the truth is I'm not really qualified to answer that question. I don't know if it worked. I mean, I've decided to let God figure that out. I know he's working on that guy's heart no matter what he told me that day. I have no idea how my short conversation played into the work God is already doing. And the truth is, I communicated how important my faith is to him. But I even did that with faltering and imperfect lips. God knows that. He just wants me to obey and open my mouth. So you know what? I left that day joyful. And you say, why? And here's why. Because I allowed God to prompt my heart to do my part, and that is just speak. And I am more than happy to let God analyze the results. So in this story, what have you heard today that can help you have a correct or a more correct view of mission? And that's what I want you to talk about in your groups today. So here's a few things to discuss in your groups as we talk about chapter 6. Number 1, how have your past results in the mission affected how you see things today? Talk about that. Number 2, do you ever feel like Moses, discouraged by what you see as your own deficiencies in this whole thing? Number 3, what will help you focus more on God's power than your own limitations? And based on all you've heard me say, will you open your mouth this week and simply speak to someone about God? So have a great time in your group discussing these. That's it for today. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. God bless you.